I'm Mr. Loscan Roy Lyngdoh. As an ordinary citizen of the state of Meghalaya, it is my privilege to have an interview with you as one among the thousands of volunteers who have taken the pledge and trained to take part in the non-violent direct action, a movement for the struggle of a separate hill state. It is also my privilege to tell you that I am one among the first batch of volunteers selected for courted arrest and ready to go to jail. There were around 30 volunteers under one group, led by top leaders of APHLC, and we are peacefully picketing the Assam Secretariat buildings, the present Meghalaya Secretariat, in the most disciplined way on the 10th of September 1968. Actually, this interview is intended to pay a tribute to the thousands of non-violent direct action volunteers who, by their normal moral courage, discipline, and sacrifices, had played a great role in achievement of the state for the Hill people. Through this interview, I would also like to show my appreciations to the HSPDP for facilitating recently the volunteers who took part in the struggle for the separate Hill state. As a youth during the 1960s, I grew up at Mokhar, near the former residence of Mrs. Roshan Wadris, former MLA and minister. My parents, which are here, they have passed away, who my father was a farmer and my mother was selling clothes at Yodo since the year 1940. They were the staunch supporter of Mr. Hobart Nyota, MP, and other leaders in the movement for Hill State at the time. I am the youngest among the family of 2 sisters and 2 brothers. After I completed my matriculation in 1966, there was a call for the leaders of from the leaders of the APHLC to join as volunteers for the Hill State movement. My family allowed me to join, and then I became one of the volunteers. At present, I am residing at Malki for the last 47 years. And I met some friends of mine who took part in the struggle for a separate state as volunteers. And they also would like, they expressed to me, and they would like to share their experiences. There are some names like Mr. Gregory Surendra Karmalki and Mr. B.M. Lanam and others. They have participated in the struggle of Hill State. So, as I spoke earlier, that my intent is to confine myself only as a volunteers, the experience as a volunteer. So I'll try to read this tribute to all the volunteers who have taken part in this days. The struggle for the separate state by the Hill people under the APHLC was a unique event, not only because of the achievement of the objective in comparatively short period of time, but also because of the manner in which the movement was conducted. This was made possible by various factors. The main factor was, of course, the wisdom and foresight of the leaders and the unflinching support of the people. The other equally important factor was the discipline of the people particularly the workers and volunteers of the FHLC all throughout the long period. Although the movement for the state was mass-based, the FHLC took care to see that the movement should be guided by a disciplined force of volunteers and workers. The adherence of the FHLC to peaceful and constitutional struggle ultimately had crystallized into the organization known as Non-Violent Direct Action, Satyagraha Volunteers. The volunteers organization consisted of both men and women who were carefully selected by the leaders and were then passed through an intensive training in the basic principles and techniques of the movement. The training imparted was meant to build the spirit, the mind, and the body of the individuals. The program consisted of physical exercise, prayer, and education on the concept of non-violence and peaceful struggle on similar lines as enunciated by the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, and the great non-violent Negro leader, Martin Luther King Jr. The training must emphasize moral development and personal sacrifices for the great cause of justice and freedom. For many years, the volunteers were regularly and systematically trained and tested to enable them to face any eventuality with fearlessness and love. On many occasions, the volunteers were put to duty and were able to prove their mettle in various hartals, public demonstrations, processions, and the like. The volunteers' role in the struggle reached culmination on the 10th September 1968, when they came out in hundreds to paralyze the administration of the government of Assam at Shillong by peacefully picketing the secretariat buildings in the most disciplined way. They were quoting arrests, and thousands more in the hill districts were ready to go to jails in order to bring about the fulfillment of Hillman's objective for the separate state. That day was indeed a red letter day in the history of the movement of the Hill people. For on the very next day, the 11th September 1968, the Government of India announced the creation of the autonomous Hill State. 1.5 years later, on the 2nd April 1970, the autonomous state of Meghalaya was inaugurated by the Prime